It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Another week in the global asylum has come and gone. Breaking bad news headlines in a moment, but how bad is it really? How many have the courage to fully face the unspun truth? Global collapse, societal and ecological, is gaining momentum by the day. Compounding chaos and carnage aren't just coming, they're here. But what's the most important question of all? How many will summon the courage to be a part of the cure and not the disease? Making a difference for the better starts with fully facing the gathering storm head on. On that note, let's get started. Breaking bad news headlines, starting with this. Geoengineering projects advance despite public outcry. That's from MSN. From that report, Solar Radiation Management Research Program is testing the feasibility of injecting aerosols into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight and reduce global temperatures. Does anyone look up? How can they continue to perpetually push this blatant, glaring lie when our skies are filled with exactly that? Jet-sprayed geoengineering filth. Next headline, conspiracy theories fuel state efforts to ban geoengineering. That's from political.ene news. And that's by Chelsea Harvey. That's the author. Remember that name. And now starts the disinformation from Chelsea Harvey and Politico. Far-right and anti-vaccine groups are part of a push in dozens of states to prohibit the theoretical climate change fix of blocking the sun's rays. Let's stop there. First, Chelsea, why are you mixing your medical treatment ideologies with a report on climate engineering and about your baseless attempt to deny what's long since been taking place in our skies? Very pathetic effort. Miss Chelsea Harvey from Politico, this question. How do you think the public will respond to you once they fully awaken to the climate engineering operations and your part in the criminal cover-up of the same? Perhaps you should ask yourself this question, Miss Harvey. From the Politico report, lawmakers in at least 25 states, actually it's up to about 3 dozen at this point, attempting legislation, have introduced legislation, they say, to ban controversial climate intervention known as solar geoengineering. They continue, the technology, which involves spraying reflective materials into the atmosphere to block sunlight, is unproven and risky. But some researchers argue, the report says, that the practice deserves more scientific investigation, especially as global temperatures continue to rise. How can this debate even go on? It's mind-numbing. In our daily filth-filled skies that look nothing like historical norms, blue skies all but gone everywhere, from TV commercials to movies to walking outside our door, and yet this pretend it might happen someday debate continues. Chelsea Harvey and Politico press on in their report with this. A new spate of legislation threatens to kneecap those efforts, climate engineering, before they even begin. They began over 75 years ago, for the record. And many of the bills are rooted in conspiracy theories based on bogus science or linked to far-right groups that challenge mainstream science. Divide and conquer, politicize reality and pretend it isn't happening. There's more. Craig Siegel, an environmental policy consultant and former deputy executive officer and assistant chief counsel, how long can his title be, of the California Air Resources Board, said this: the bill's supporters, talking about the 36 states that are trying to pass legislation, are, quote, the same sort of folks who, generally speaking, are engaged in chemtrail and anti-vax discussions. So that's the center of gravity for this at the moment, end quote. Wow. Craig Siegel from the CARB board. What a programmed moronic babble that is from you. Is that the best you can do? Suggestion: a peaceful and professionally drafted letter with a link to the groundbreaking Geoengineering Watch documentary on climate engineering, The Dimming. Email the letter and the link to Craig Siegel from the CARB board and Chelsea Harvey from Politico and ask them to explain why they are lying about the proven ongoing climate engineering operations that are raging in our skies. Openly CC as many awake and aware individuals as you can in your email so that Craig and Chelsea are aware that many are a part of the conversation and awaiting their answer. And for these kinds of people to make a mockery of weather warfare that is wreaking havoc on innocent populations around the globe is absolutely criminal. It's criminal. And the same sort of efforts with emailing, the dimming, CCing other individuals should be done with climate engineering denying elected officials, agricultural groups, environmental organizations. The list goes on and on. Start spot fires of awareness. Ask others to do the same. We are rapidly running out of time. Let's make it count. Next, from Bloomberg News, the risky climate weapon whose time may have arrived. From that report, startups using geoengineering to find a silver bullet for global warming. Really? Geoengineering is a silver bullet. Perhaps that depends on the point of view. For the controllers, perhaps it's true, weather, chemical, and biological warfare that they can wage on innocent and unknowing populations anywhere in the world without said populations ever even knowing they're under assault would perhaps seem a silver bullet to the manipulators of the matrix. And if the more awake and aware members of populations look up and justifiably question the jet-sprayed, spreading, lingering filth trails in our skies, just tell the masses that they're only seeing jet exhaust. A blatant lie, which alarmingly, some organization leaders in close communication with the current administration and who are pretending they're fighting climate engineering are actually starting to propagate this false, just jet exhaust narrative, in spite of the fact, again, that they claim to be in the fight to expose and halt climate engineering. So how exactly does that work? Claiming to be against climate engineering while simultaneously denying it by pretending the film footage, proven jet-sprayed dispersions in our skies, lab test proven as well, mountains of documents, I could go on and on, is just jet exhaust. Except, of course, it isn't. View the dimming from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Proof provided, end of rational denial. Moving on, lots of new reports on climate engineering, all of them pretending it hasn't been ongoing for over 75 years already. From sciencenews.org, solar geoengineering moves into the spotlight as climate concerns grow. From that report, depending on whom you ask, it's potentially dangerous, the report says, promising or uncertain. Stop. To use the word promising to describe what happens when skies all over the world are sprayed day in and day out with tens of millions of tons of highly toxic nanoparticles is beyond alarming. Promising, they say. Promising for who? The controllers of the weather, chemical, and biological warfare? Promising because their crown jewel covert weapon is crushing populations, again, without the vast majority having any clue what's happening to them and why? Let's continue from the report that states, geoengineering is a reliable, quick fix. Again, fix for what? Population control and culling? The sciencenews.org report then states this, in the face of this grim reality, referring to the collapsing climate systems, which climate engineering has helped to create, global attention on and funding for climate intervention strategies is skyrocketing. They continue, calculations suggest that for every 10 lives saved from 2050 to 2080 by cooling Earth's temperatures, meaning with climate engineering, which is not curing anybody, it's actually decimating what's left of the web of life, the report says there would be only one extra death from air pollution and ozone loss. How mind-numbingly false can all of this be? Let's correct the final statements from Science News. First, the 2050 to 2018 timeframe. No need to worry about any of that. On the current trajectory, most, if not all, will be gone by 2030. And that's not even taking into account nuclear everything, warfare and power plant meltdowns as societal collapse unfolds and accelerates. And next, any narrative that claims climate engineering is saving lives as opposed to costing countless lives is a lie. Try not to breathe. Ozone destruction alone, on top of everything else, complete contamination of the planet, disruption of the hydrological cycle. Our collapsing ozone layer is an extremely near-term existential threat, and that doesn't mean centuries or decades. It means before the end of this decade. It's unfolding now. We're down to, based on our measurements at geoengineeringwatch.org, with state-of-the-art equipment, 30% of the ozone layer remaining. Functional collapse means no more food. It means that when the refrigerators run out, we're done. That's what it means. And articles like this pretend it might happen someday. If we decided to someday deploy climate engineering, look up, stand up, make your voice heard. On that note from Euronews.com, scientists say human-caused pollution may be masking the true extent of climate warming. There it is again, could, may, might. From the report, the covert selling of climate engineering atmospheric spraying by lying about the true impact of our toxic nanoparticle-filled skies. And they want to pretend it's just pollution, but it is not. In fact, based on our testing, and we'll release a report on this soon, we're talking about manufactured particles showing up in the precipitation. This is not just, quote, pollution. And that's a test done by one of the most renowned testing institutions in the entire planet. Here it is. More from the report. Emissions of anthropogenic fine particles have cooled the climate, that's a lie, by modifying cloud properties and have thus partly counteracted greenhouse gas-induced climate warming. That's a statement from the University of Eastern Finland. They say based on these results, this cooling effect is at the upper end of previous estimates based on satellite data. There it is again, the big lie. Used to covertly sell climate engineering, aka stratospheric aerosol injection, by pretending it has a long-term cooling impact. Pollution is good, right? Injecting particles in the atmosphere, good, according to this power structure scientist. Again, all of it a blatant lie. Short-term, toxic, chemical cool-downs like the recent chemical snow blizzards in New Orleans and Florida, while temperatures were well above freezing and raining in the Arctic at the exact same window of time in January. Power structure paid and controlled scientists that author reports of total deception, like the one that I just covered, need to be held legally and morally accountable by a justifiably enraged global population. That's the proverbial pitchforks and torches moment. Again, I ask, how long can you hold your breath? And can we ask our children to do the same? On that note, from Newsweek, map shows cities where children told to limit going outside. Why? Because of the air quality. And I grew up in this filth in Southern California. It was so thick that there were days we couldn't have recess, baseball games. You could only see about a quarter mile, and I wondered what's wrong with the adults around me. Why aren't they alarmed? I was 10 years old on a baseball field, and I was completely alarmed. All I could think about was getting out of that place. And I worked my entire life to do it. I reached the wilderness of Northern California expecting to find clean air, and what do I find? My solar system has reduced charging capacity of 60, 70, 80% on days when these aircraft are dispersing their filth into our skies. And now I know I'm in a fight for life. That was over 20 years ago, and I won't stop till what's happening in our skies stops. So with this Newsweek report, keeping our children indoors because the air is so toxic that we're to limit their exposure. And no, it isn't just industrial and transportation pollution. Mathematically speaking, the greatest source of highly toxic nanoparticle pollution elements in our atmosphere is the global climate engineering Manhattan Project geoengineering jet spraying dispersions that are dumping, from our estimates from extensive lab testing, somewhere in the range of 40 to 60 million tons of these toxic elements into our skies annually. Again, try not to breathe. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, The End of the World as We Know It broadcast, brought to you by geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We can and we absolutely must reach this critical mass of awareness. It is the great imperative. Start a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data. That's how we move the fight forward. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising printed materials available on our homepage. We pass these extremely high-quality, full-color printed materials on at less than our cost of producing and shipping. Our only goal, to expose and halt the insanity in our skies. Please help us to sound the alarm. Next from ehn.org. Dr. David Keith's proposal to cool Earth sparks debate. From that report, critics fear geoengineering could lead to unforeseen global consequences such as altered weather patterns and health risks. Keith acknowledges, the report says, the risks, but emphasizes the potential to save millions of lives by mitigating heat-related deaths. Really, Dr. Keith? Unforeseen consequences? Well, who could have imagined that? At an international climate engineering conference all the way back in 2010, Dr. Keith was asked about the toxicological effects of dumping tens of millions of tons of aluminum nanoparticles into the atmosphere on an annual basis as part of climate engineering solar radiation management operations. What was his response? Quote, "Could terrible things happen tomorrow?" He said, "We don't know." End quote. Stop and think about that answer from the world's most recognized climate engineer, Dr. David Keith. How is it that I'm aware of his answer? Because I'm the one that asked the question at the conference, and I was banned from the remaining conferences for the rest of that year for doing so. You can see all of this on film and on the record. Take the time to view the Geoengineering Watch documentary film, The Dimming, for free from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Next question. How's the planet faring after 75 years of covert climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare? Not good. From sciencealert.com. Quote, "Exceptional ongoing global heat streak defies climate predictions." From that report. Global temperatures hovered at historic highs in March, stated an EU climate monitoring agency, prolonging an unprecedented heat streak that has pushed the bounds of scientific explanation. Stop. Really? Yet another example of we just don't understand what's going on from the so-called climate science community? I knew and have tried desperately to sound the alarm for over 2 decades. I've always stated it's not as bad as we're being told. It's exponentially worse than we're being told. And climate intervention operations, aka weather warfare, is further fueling this planetary meltdown. And that's exactly what it is. We would be lucky if we faced, quote, global warming or, quote, climate change. What is unfolding, again, with climate engineering further fueling the process, is an abrupt climate collapse, blinding speed. If you don't believe that, in the coming weeks and months, you will. Wait and see. The report continues, and while I cover this, remember and consider drought deluge scenarios are the hallmark of climate engineering weather warfare operations. Here it is. From the report, some parts of Europe experienced the driest March on record, and others the wettest March on record. Or from the report, concerns over the global economy were dominating headlines at a time when India, for example, was enduring scorching heat, and Australia was swamped by floods. An area about the size of Texas flooded in Australia. How many Americans know that? The report says scientists stated they were not certain about what else might have contributed to this recent heat spike. They also said that there were, quote, phenomena that remain to be explained. There it is again. They just can't explain what they're paid and threatened to pretend isn't happening in our skies. The shockingly blatant climate engineering assault. Our science fiction skies that nearly the whole of so-called civilized society has so far refused to face and acknowledge. So about the destruction of the planet's life support systems and the unfolding, accelerating collapse of the same, consider and remember, no functional environment, no economy, no people. Simple. On that note from marketwatch.com, economists now say a dire economic slowdown has already begun. The report says the economy is headed for a sharp downturn. Layoffs will surge. Let's stop there. For many, a crashing economy is their most frightening foe. But in reality, it's the least of our unfolding challenges, which will continue to worsen at blinding speed. Those that still don't believe it, again, will soon. They won't have a choice. Wait and see. So it's not the economy, stupid, as the saying goes. It's our soon-to-be lifeless planet if we remain on the current course. Moving on. Climate engineering is the bottom line factor that is manipulating precipitation patterns. Too much or too little. On that note, from Fox Weather, Lake Mead is at record lows again. From Newsweek, warning issued over Lake Mead, Lake Powell water levels. From westernwater.com, Arizona's groundwater depletion exceeds Lake Mead's capacity. And in my backyard, literally, Lake Shasta. From MSN, Lake Shasta's remarkable comeback from drought captured on stunning images. Well, how wonderful. A lake full of toxic water surrounded by a rapidly dying forest that will surely soon incinerate. From the report, Lake Shasta, California's largest reservoir, has made a stunning comeback. After years of severe drought, the recovery marked by rising water levels and quote, lush landscapes. I'll get to that in a moment. Showcases nature's resilience. The report says these images reveal the transformation, offering a hopeful reminder of the power of conservation efforts and favorable weather conditions. Are we supposed to give praise to weather warfare for dropping toxic rain and snow on our forests? It's killing soil microbiome, killing root systems, and everything else. Let's stop there. This deception-laced report is exactly the kind that is carefully crafted by power structure sources to pacify populations and keep them fast asleep at the wheel until the moment of impact. No, we're not surrounded by, quote, lush landscapes. Total lie. The forests are imploding with dying or already dead trees, Doug firs, all of them, some stages of death or dying. That's the predominant tree in the forest. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they're either completely ignorant of what's happening in the forests or they're lying. Take your pick. From Yale360.edu. Growing risk of thirst waves. Has anybody ever heard that term before? How many terms do we hear now from the so-called science and meteorological community? They make this stuff up as they go, literally, to make it seem as if it's always been there, which it hasn't. As the planet warms, the report states, they continue, the atmosphere is getting thirstier. A new study finds that warming is leading to more frequent bouts of hot, dry weather that causes soils to lose large volumes of water to evaporation, of course. The growing number of thirst waves, the report says, poses a challenge to farmers, you think? They say researchers define a thirst wave as 3 days in a row of unusually high evaporative demand. The effect is worldwide. The science study authors found weather whiplash may turn out to be one of the more universal global changes on a warming Earth. Let's stop there. Laws of physics make clear it must rain more overall on a warming planet, not less. If it's raining less overall, and it is, yes, there's deluges in many places, but there's protracted drought in many others, devastating drought. If it's not raining more overall, 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming is what should be occurring. Climate engineering is the untold factor in this equation. It's thwarting evaporation. The polymer fibers, they're spreading everywhere, including over sea surfaces, is thwarting evaporation. The blocking of direct sunlight, thwarting evaporation. The altering of wind patterns, thwarting evaporation. From every conceivable direction, climate engineers control the hydrological cycle, and not for benevolent purposes. Keep that in mind. Next report, same theme from MSN. What causes sudden flash droughts and why? The report says they're increasing. Indeed, they are. I just went over that. Again, climate engineering, single greatest drought and flash drought inducing factor, period. And there's no legitimate discussion of climate anything from any perspective without first and foremost addressing the climate engineering elephant in the equation. More water woes from the UK Guardian revealed big tech's new data centers will take water from the world's driest areas. From the report, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are building data centers in water-scarce parts of 5 continents. With Donald Trump pledging to support them, the report says, the 3 technology giants are planning hundreds of data centers in the US and across the globe with a potentially huge impact on populations already living with water scarcity. The report then says these companies plan to expand their activities in some of the world's most arid regions. Source material and the Guardian's analysis found the water usage will be even higher, as current water use estimates don't even take into account water used to generate the electricity that will power the new installations. In Spain, for example, with 75% of the country already at risk of desertification, the combination of the climate crisis and climate engineering and the data centers expansion is bringing Spain to the verge of ecological collapse. Well, you can't be without internet, right? Who cares about food and water or functional environment? Meta, the owner of Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, opened a $1 billion data center in Mesa, Arizona, and Google is developing 2 more. Maricopa County, Arizona, where Microsoft also has 2 active data centers, is facing extreme drought, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. In January, at the White House, President Trump announced, quote, Project Stargate, which he called the largest AI infrastructure project in history. Starting in Texas, the $500 billion joint venture between OpenAI, the American software company Oracle, Japan-based SoftBank, and Emirati investment firm MGX will finance data centers across the U.S. Yeah, we'll see how far they get before total collapse sets in. The entire data center fiasco is yet another stunning example of the human race's self-annihilating tendencies. The endless quest for shiny metals at any cost to human beings or the environment on which our survival completely depends is another example of self-annihilating tendencies. With that in mind, on the other side of the world, other forms of water woes. One example of countless others. From atmospheric Earth, a new gold rush is turning Ghana's water into poison. From that report, illegal gold mining has contaminated more than 60% of Ghana's water sources. Who needs food and water? Shiny metal for rich nations. Starving, dying, contaminated populations in Gaza. And we're no different here in the U.S. with our fracking insanity that is permanently contaminating groundwater everywhere, with 500 plus chemicals, the majority of which don't even have to be disclosed, thanks to the exemptions that the oligarchy has granted to themselves for that insanity. Drill, baby, drill. Another from Yale360.edu. With the great mussel die-off, scientists scramble for answers. This is important. It's a snapshot of yet one more ecosystem completely collapsing. One of the most endangered animals in the world, freshwater mussels, are threatened by pollution, climate change, habitat loss, and invasive species. But the epicenter of their diversity, the southeastern U.S., the root cause of catastrophic die-off remains a mystery. It's a total mystery to them, right? In California, we have an endangered species, the Delta smelt. One of the state's top microbiologists contacted Geoengineering some years ago to tell us that he was finding aluminum nanoparticles adhered to the gills of the smelt. Those nanoparticles coming down through the rain and ultimately from climate engineering dispersions above the clouds. And he told us every time he tried to bring this to the attention of his superiors, he got a boot put over his neck. Top fish and game official in Northern California that I know personally told me the same. She tried to bring up the massive aluminum contamination buildup behind dams, Shasta Dam being one, and she was shut down every time she tried to do so. Redding Environmental Waste invited me to a confidential closed-door meeting. I was shown tests of the runoff from the Sacramento River, the drinking water for much of the state of California, packed with aluminum. They didn't know where it was coming from. I informed them where it was coming from. It's in the rain. It obviously has to be in the runoff. It matches climate engineering patents exactly. And have they ever disclosed those tests? No, never. Too worried about their paychecks and pensions to actually tell the truth and preserve the only thing they truly own, their honor. This is pathetic. I feel I'm on the wrong planet. I felt that for so many years. There's so little honor in our species. Moving on from the report, freshwater mussels are one of the most endangered groups of animals in the world. North America is currently home to more than 300 native species, not for long. An explanation for the extent of the U.S.'s most widespread die-off, which began decades ago in the southeast, has remained out of reach. They just can't figure it out. That's what they're paid to do, not figure it out. Changing gears, what's coming for the scheduled U.S. weather? The flip-flop weather whiplash scenario, heating the western U.S. with an ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome in order to enhance the scheduled coming chemical cool-down of the eastern U.S. You can see this scenario. I've been documenting it for well over a decade. Search geoengineeringwatch.org, Engineering Winter. Go to our homepage, just search the Engineering Winter section, and search Geoengineering is creating freeze-fry extremes. This is not nature. There's not a weather so-called forecaster, aka script reader, that doesn't know this is going on unless they're cognitively challenged. I'll leave it at that. Or lying. Take your pick. From MSN, has it felt especially windy to you so far this spring? ? The report states, winds this spring have fueled unusually widespread wildfires, spurred deadly dust storms, downed trees with root systems that have been compromised from the toxic rain, starting with aluminum nanoparticles, caused power outages and damaged properties. The report then says, when combined with an early emergence of spring leaves, the blustery conditions might also be having an impact on your allergies. Let's stop there. Of course, no mention of the tens of millions of tons of toxic nanoparticles being dispersed in skies annually around the globe by climate intervention operations, particles that are not disclosed with any official air quality testing, and that's by design. Most air quality testing tests for PM10, rarely PM2.5. We're talking about nanoparticles which are exponentially smaller. They go completely under the radar, regardless of the amount of these materials there are floating around in our air column. Again, all by design. Further, I was told in a closed-door meeting at the Capitol in Sacramento with 5 top EPA officials, the system is rigged. They're told to test for combustion particulates only. The rest of the samples go out the window, so they're not even looking for these elements in any size particle. Can't find what you're not looking for, what you're paid not to look for. Entire system has been rigged for decades to hide this elephant in the equation to the last possible moment, because if it's disclosed, the liability issue is absolutely inconceivable. Every single weather cataclysm, everything then becomes a potential liability to everyone, anyone involved in these programs. And that's why in government documents like a 800-page Senate document posted at geoengineeringwatch.org from the U.S. government, again, that specifically calls for total blanket legal immunity for anyone and everyone involved with these programs. And is that not a massive glaring harbinger of how dangerous these programs are? And our government's still pretending that it's not going on? And even people in alt media that pretend to be fighting against climate engineering now denying it, saying it's just jet exhaust? Where is honor in this equation? Where? Just to be a part of some club or not ostracized from your group, to simply lie and deny an existential threat, a near-term existential threat? We can't breathe without sucking this material in. How is that not an immediate fight for life? It is. Report says, why has it been so blustery? This spring, there have been particularly large temperature differences occurring over short distances, this is important, across the United States, known as temperature gradients. The report then states, enhancing these temperature gradients have been more frequent and stronger southerly winds blowing from the western Gulf of Mexico. When this particularly warm air clashes with cold air moving southward from Canada, a storm can form, fueled by the strong differences in temperatures potentially intensified by the marine heat wave. I've been over this week after week in this broadcast. What's happening and how is climate engineering affecting it? They have been migrating moisture in from the west, from the Pacific, across the western U.S., chemically nucleating that moisture. That's why we have the weather whiplash scenarios, temperature whiplash, and snow one day and 80 degrees the next. They push this chemically cooled, cold surface layer eastward and then collide it with the warm flow of moisture out of the record warm Gulf, and you have unstable atmospheric conditions, which is a spawning ground for what? Cyclones, tornadoes. Connect the dots. Climate engineering inseparable from all of it. Across the Atlantic, there's this. From newsukraine.roc. Listen to this. Hurricane sweeps across Siberia, sparking massive wildfires and casualties. Has anybody heard of a Siberian hurricane lately? Report says a number of regions in Siberia have been struck by a hurricane which has intensified wildfires. The first casualties have already been reported. According to Russian media, a state of emergency was declared. In addition to the fires, the wind itself is causing significant destruction. Yeah, nothing to see here. Move along and don't look up, whatever you do. From thewatchers.org, hailstorm destroys wheat crops in Russia's key agricultural region. They're hammering crops across the globe. It's not an accident. It's not an unintended consequence. They're being targeted. The consistency is beyond dispute. Targeting. Flash freeze, flash drought, flash flood, flash hailstorms. From this report, unstable weather conditions have persisted across Russia in 2025. They're all doing it, all of them. All major powers know they can no longer support their populations on a collapsing planet. That's the fact of the matter. I realize it's a very bitter pill to swallow, but while we're here and while we're standing, let's make a difference for the better. Let's stop the destruction. Let's allow the planet to respond on its own to the damage already done and salvage what's left of it so that someone might make it through what's coming. And that's worth fighting for. Example I've given over and over and over. I'll give it again. If your child was in a burning house and you knew you had almost no chance of saving them, would you not try? Because that's more or less our situation. From thehill.com, insects are devouring Colorado's trees thanks to climate change. No. not just thanks to climate change. Thanks to the toxic rain that's killing soil microbiome, that's killing root systems, that's weakening the trees. They have no defenses against these beetles. And none of that disclosed by the so-called experts. Criminal omission by the so-called experts. What a cowardly population we live in academia especially. And I know some of these people that have never told the truth. I know some of the state's top entomologists from my past habitat restoration in Northern California, and they have never told the truth, even though they've admitted to me in the field that they are very aware of what's going on. No courage, no honor. This report says climate-induced warming is fueling proliferation of insects keen on invading Colorado's forests and leaving the trees they devour for dead. A new report has found as the death toll of trees increases, so too does the likelihood of wildfires, all connected, climate engineering at the core. The good news, they say, is we know Colorado is on the right path to address these challenges and foster forests and communities that are resilient to wildfire and forest pests. What an absolute cop-out of Pollyanna nonsense that is. That's like saying they know that Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and the Tooth Fairy is going to save them. Total, meaningless, feel-good Pollyanna hopium. That's what that last sentence is. From MSN, Weather Service blocked from monitoring severe weather. How convenient for the climate engineers, a.k.a. weather terrorists. For those that had convinced themselves that the new administration was going to curtail climate engineering, guess again. They're only doubling down. Full throttle. Footnote reminder, in addition to the 1-hour interview RFK conducted with me over a year ago, I was again contacted by Robert over 4 weeks ago. The conclusion of our short conversation, my stressing to him that if his administration had any serious intent to expose the global climate engineering assault, whistleblower protection carved in stone and well publicized would be a must first step. Have I seen or heard any follow-up since? No. Only the complete 180 from the primary political group that was in the closest communication with Robert regarding the climate engineering issue. As already stated, the founder of this group is now promoting the patently false "it's just jet exhaust" official denial, a convenient narrative for all those that apparently never honestly intended to confront the climate engineering issue in the first place. Also, for the record, I was initially appointed as the Geoengineering Counsel to this group that was advising RFK on climate engineering. The moment their founder did this 180-degree turnaround, I excused myself from any further association. Remember and consider, we are swimming with sharks. You're listening to the weekly installment of the Global Alert News Hour, the Bad News Broadcast installment, April 12th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the Global Alert News broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast file for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News report can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities, now with almost 26 million views on YouTube. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't looking up. Again, picture's worth 1,000 words. Here's one way. Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images. Pictures, again, worth 1,000 words. We have new Geoengineering Watch hoodies, new Geoengineering Watch shirts, photos of both on our homepage. We have scannable business cards and bumper stickers. all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Again, reaching a critical mass, the great imperative. If we can expose it, we can stop it. And doing so would be the first and most important leap we can make in the right direction. To all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering insanity, you will always have my deepest gratitude. Thank you. On to collapsing food supplies and societies about U.S. farms from MSN. Farmers devastated by delayed wheat season as harvest outlook turns grim. We have reasons to be concerned, the report says. Let's not forget the collapsing pollinator populations down to single-digit percentages remaining from historical populations. That's a very dark harbinger for the human race. What did Einstein say? We'd have several years to live once the pollinators perish. We're in that window now. And there are many other converging catastrophes on top of that. Next, some headlines from around the world that most Americans never see due to non-stop scripted political theater, an endless bread and circus fiasco. From the Greek City Times, Greece was built for a climate that no longer exists, warns University of Athens professor. The report says, given the scale of climate phenomenon, major interventions must come from the central government, regional authorities, and municipalities. You can't just stop what's unfolding. It's like stopping a tidal wave with a paper cup. The human race has triggered what can't be stopped. Thelma and Louise moment, sailing through the guardrail, flying through the air toward the bottom of the canyon. You can pump the brakes all you want. We're going to hit the bottom. That being said, if we can expose and stop what's happening in our skies, allow the planet to respond to the damage already done, we can buy time to then face other challenges, and that's worth fighting for. From extremetemps.com, extreme heat in North and South Africa. They are incinerating there. This is only barely scratching the surface of that problem. From the UK Independent, summer arrives early as record heat waves engulf northern India. From extremetemps.com, record heat in Indonesia. Another from extremetemps.com, endless record heat in Australia, to go with the record flooding. Which is next in the next headline from the UK Daily Mail. Aussies in remote areas of western New South Wales have been urged to prepare for isolation of up to 10 weeks after being cut off from civilization by flooding, about the size of Texas. See none of that here. Political theater, dawn till dusk. From NPR, flooding death toll in Congo's capital reaches 33 as officials race to help victims. That's only the beginning there. Total collapse is unfolding in so many countries around the globe that we are very close to the point where no one will be able to help anyone. From mehrnews.com, strange hailstorm in Iraq. Wonder what could have caused that. Chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. Please search the engineering winter section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. This is absolutely not nature. The report says a hailstorm with golf ball-sized hail hit northern Iraq, causing significant damage. Dozens of cars were affected by the severe weather, much more than that. And here in the U.S., we have baseball and softball-sized hail with almost every single storm. Why can't people connect the dots when it goes from 80 to 30 in a day with baseball and softball-sized hail? It's called chemical ice nucleation for weather modification. Our tests have proven that at geoengineeringwatch.org. From the UK Guardian, U.S. banks predict climate goals will fail. They already have. But air conditioning firms will thrive. What a relief. We can just invest in air conditioners and we'll all be fine. This report says that reports predict global heating will bring catastrophes and that air conditioning market could grow by 41%. Great. Our stock portfolio in air conditioners grows on a dead planet. On the subject of air conditioners, in this case the planet's air conditioners, aka the polar regions, they're more broken by the day. Climate engineering is further fueling the process. On top of the incineration of 100 million barrels of hydrocarbon fuel a day, 26 million tons of coal a day, cutting down the forest, paving the planet, poisoning the oceans, all of this together is the recipe for near-term planetary omnicide. That's our soon-to-be destination if we do not completely alter our course. From SciTech Daily, Antarctica on thin ice. Satellite data reveals 2025's stunning sea ice collapse. How many people still rant global cooling, coming ice age? What reality do they live in? What planet are they living on? Because it's not this one. I'm only encouraging people to, this is not about Al Gore. It's not about environmental groups. It's about reality, what you can see with your own eyes. Please watch Chasing Ice. And it's way worse than when that film was made, but it's non-political, frontline film footage of total cryosphere collapse. That's the Earth's ice deposits. If you don't believe what you see with your own eyes, there's nothing I can tell you. But please break out of ideology. Please break out of the herd mentality. Look at what's happening in the polar regions and understand that climate engineering and the attempt to hide it is making it far worse, not better. This report states scientists define sea ice extent as the total area. Listen to this. I've said this on the broadcast many times, where at least 15% of the surface is covered by ice. Let's stop there. That's another way they hide just how collapsed it is. Calling polar ice pack any area of sea ice or of ocean that's 15% ice or more, isn't that still 85% ocean? How in the world is that ice pack? That's how they statistically hide just how bad it is. The report says it's not yet clear whether the southern hemisphere has entered a new normal with perennial low ice, or if Antarctica is passing a phase that will revert to prior levels in years to come. What a moronic statement from Walt Mayer, an ice scientist with NSIDC. That's like saying, back to the Thelma and Louise moment, crash through the guardrail, flying through the air to the bottom of the canyon, like saying, we're not yet sure if the car will somehow magically end up back on the road or if it'll end up in the bottom of the canyon. No words. From geographical.co, how ice melt and double jet streams are making Europe hotter. Jet stream manipulation, ionosphere heaters, climate engineering, completely inseparable from all of that. They say, while the planet continues to grapple with the impact of warming, there's one continent being affected particularly hard, Europe. In the last 30 years, its temperatures have increased by more than double the global average. There's no meteorological reason for that to be so profound without climate engineering in the equation. It's not hard to see who's wielding the most power here, is it? U.S. military has 3 times more aerial tankers, like those used in climate engineering operations, 3 times more than all other militaries in the world combined. Think about that one. From MSN, climate crisis accelerates. Arctic's ice-free day looms ahead. Yes, it does. It's called a BOE, Blue Ocean Event. May happen this year. We could have a dual BOE this year. Again, climate engineering trying to hide it with chemical ice nucleation, which overall heats the planet, pounding the nails into our collective coffins. What would that mean, a blue ocean event? It means that the majority of summer ice is gone. Now the dark ocean absorbs 90% of the sun's incoming thermal energy as opposed to the ice reflecting 90%. Everything goes exponential. The methane deposits on the seafloor thaw and release, migrate through the water column into the atmosphere, covering the planet like a layer of glass. It means we are living on a different planet at that point. Paradigm is over, and we are literally on the cusp of that now. From phys.org, high mercury levels found in Arctic birds. Imagine that. And consider that if coal fly ash is indeed a base material for the climate engineering operations, it does contain significant amounts of mercury because it's condensed from the combustion process. And so it's in everything. It's in all of us. We know aluminum is a primary element in climate engineering operations and patents. That's in all of us now, too. We know from peer-reviewed study that the synergistic toxicity between mercury and aluminum, because the mercury levels are high in all of us, too, I assure you of that. It's not just the Arctic seabirds. So when you combine those two metals, the overall toxicity increases by as much as 10,000%, 100 times worse. Now let's add the plethora of other toxic elements. It's a wonder any of us are able to function at this point, and how much longer will we be able to? Moving on. What else is dying? Short answer, everything, but let's look at this first from the UK Independent. Gray whales are dying again off the Pacific coast. Scientists question, is climate change to blame? How simplistic could this possibly be? Again, ignoring climate engineering, destroying the ozone layer. We have intense UV radiation frying plankton, which is the bottom of the food chain in the ocean. They have to feed in the upper layers of the water column. They're being incinerated with UVC radiation. We're poisoning the ocean from every conceivable direction, especially in this region of the Pacific. We know, as I've been over in this broadcast, that somewhere in the range of 500,000 barrels of DDT were dumped right off the LA harbor. That's one dump site of now what is believed to be 18 dump sites. The oceans are rapidly heating. They're deoxygenating. The kelp is dying, ecosystems dying everywhere, food chain collapse, and they're blaming this just on climate change and ignoring all these other factors, again, with climate engineering at the top of a very long list of massive factors. Climate scientists at this point are either criminally ignorant of the very fields of study in which we're told they're experts, or they're lying. Take your pick. From nature.com, airborne microplastics enter plant leaves and end up in our food. No surprise, but over that broadcast after broadcast after broadcast, nanoparticles infiltrate every life form. They're in everything at this point, including human organs, all of them. Let's add this from the Lancet Science Journal. Climate change fuels deadly dust storms worldwide. Is it just dust in the dust storms? Short answer, no. Remember, 40 to 60 million tons of toxic nanoparticles being dispersed into our skies annually, all of it blowing around, and we get to breathe it. From Al Jazeera, water crisis looms in Pakistan as rivers begin to dry up. Again, climate engineering controlling the spigot there, bringing countries to their knees, forcing their governments to conform with power structure dictates. Wet bulb temperatures, that is the combination of temperature and humidity that is reaching levels never before known in human history. It makes the heat indexes go up so high that parts of the Middle East are recording heat indexes up in the 160 range last summer. It's going to be worse this summer. We're passing the threshold of human survivability. Don't believe it? You will. Combination of temperature and humidity, heat index called the heat bulb temperature. From Reuters.com, water looms as new front in Mexico's trade negotiations with the U.S. Again, water wars are full throttle. Who controls the spigot the most? Who do you think? The military that is better funded and bigger than the next 10 biggest militaries on the planet. We all know who that is. From courthousenews.com, worst case scenario, Arizona remains hottest, driest in recent history. Big troubles coming for Arizona in the Southwest. Let's add this. The Trump administration orders half of national forest open for logging. This is an ongoing story. Yeah, let's just sell off what little is left of the environment. Pirates loading their pockets with loot on a rapidly sinking ship. On the current course, no one gets out alive. This is an ongoing story. I encourage people to look into this, and this is not political. It's called survival. And this is exactly the way not to survive. Another from PBS, Trump administration finalizes coal plant pollution rollback. In other words, gut regulation, loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until nothing is left. Am I a Biden fan? No, of course not. Biden, in fact, issued more drilling permits than Trump's first administration. How many on the left know that? All bad, all power structure actors in the play, all of them. And one of their roles, to create as much chaos as possible to distract the public from the oncoming train until the moment of impact. Here's another from Axios.com. Trump pushes coal to feed AI power demand. Remember the AI stories earlier? All the water they're using in places that don't have it. Let's incinerate more coal to create more coal fly ash for the climate engineers while we're adding more mercury to the atmosphere and fueling the AI centers, which we know we can't live without those, right? Circus of insanity. From Mother Jones Journal, new Trump executive order would punish states for combating climate change. They're going to punish states also for passing legislation to stop climate engineering. Is that coming next? The new order directs the government to expeditiously take action to stop the enforcement of state laws designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The order claims many states have enacted or are enacting burdensome and ideologically motivated, quote, climate change or energy policies that threaten American energy dominance and our economic and national security. And I guarantee you, climate engineering operations are falling into this category. If you think they're going to do anything about it, think again. And about the protesters from CNN, hands off. Protesters across U.S. rally against President Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Here's my question about these protesters and every single environmental protest event and organization. When will the criminal hypocrisy be abandoned and an honest acknowledgement of global climate engineering operations be adopted? When? Spraying tens of millions of tons of toxic nanoparticles in disguise around the world and then manipulating these elements with extremely powerful and harmful frequency transmissions. What could go wrong? Here's a Thoreau quote that rings through my mind all too often. How does it become a man to behave towards the American government today? Question mark. I answer, that he cannot without disgrace be associated with it. Again, Henry David Thoreau. Let's add this from Thomas Aquinas. He who is not angry when there is just cause for anger is immoral. Why? Because anger looks to the good of justice. And if you can live amid injustice without anger, you are immoral as well as unjust. At face value, the human race does not seem ready to survive itself. Again, I ask, how many at this late hour will summon the courage and take the necessary steps to be a part of the cure and not the disease? Whatever each of our individual circumstances and situations, none of us are in a position to do nothing. Each of us, all of us, can do something, to do our best, to do what is right. That is all that's asked of us. Is that so much for the Creator to ask? For the gift of life? Our will, our honor, our virtue, all gifts entrusted to each of us individually to guard as our greatest possessions, indeed as our only true possessions that can never be taken, only sold or given away. And sadly, how many have chosen to do exactly that? We are here for a reason. It's not an accident of fate or a mistake of the maker. It's our journey, our quest, our path of learning, of giving back to the whole. This is where truly unshakable solace lies. We can only know what difference we might yet make if we apply ourselves fully to the task of doing so. If we collectively march forward in this fight with an unyielding fury, we could yet accomplish profound good even at this late hour. Fully exposing and halting the atmospheric aerosol spraying assault is the first and most important leap we could yet make in the right direction. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Have faith in the profound difference that each of us can make if we but try. Share credible data from a credible source. Please make your voice heard in this desperate last hour battle for all that we hold dear. Make every day count. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from Geoengineeringwatch.org.